So this morning, Adrian Mannarino took out Ben Shelton in 5 sets, and I thought I would analyze his forehand, his sort of quasi-modern technique, and show you guys the secret. And although he has some unique characteristics, which we don't often see, he still checks the same essential boxes. And I'm going to show you how the secret is not really much of a secret at all. So let's begin. In phase one of Adrian's forehand, he gets a coil and a unit turn just like every other good player. He keeps the non-hitting hand on the throat of the racket until the ball bounces, and the racket head in the take back is slightly inverted, which means it stays in front of the hand, and it's also slightly hooded. And keep in mind he has a pretty extreme grip, which is also going to play into the fact that maybe he has a little bit more of an unorthodox racket drop, which would be this phase in the swing that we're about to cover. But as for the coil and the unit turn, as long as the front shoulder is underneath the chin, we know that both shoulders have coiled together, and you're going to see when he lets go with the non-hitting arm, it's going to fall parallel with the baseline simultaneously as the racket drops and falls into pat the dog. Strings to the floor, it's how we get leverage in topspin. His take back is probably a little bit bigger than most of the players, but nonetheless his strings still get to the floor, and he has what we call the delay, where we're going to see the racket come through as the last part of the kinetic chain, and only when he starts to uncoil it's going to lag behind. And you see he's uncoiling, he's pulling in the non-hitting arm. Now, another reason why it may look a little weird to the untrained eye is because, his arm is pretty bent, maybe more bent than other players. But if you've been watching this channel for some time, you will know that hitting a bent arm forehand is completely acceptable. And you can find a long list of successful players who hit bent arm forehands. Okay, Murray, Djokovic hits bent arm forehands. And you could even say that it provides more power and leverage. I'm sure you could find many examples. So there's nothing wrong with having the elbows, tucked in per se, right? As long as your swing path is out and away from yourself and wraps around like a hula hoop, which we're going to see. The wrist is back at contact point. We're going to see him cover the top of the ball, relax the wrist into windshield wiper as we swing across the imaginary table top. Okay, and the follow through after coming over with the windshield wiper, right, the rainbow, we finish under the non-hitting shoulder. The racket wraps around across the arm, swings through independently. He checks all the major boxes. Let's look at one more forehand just for clarity. Okay, we've got the coil. Racket falls into pat the dog. Notice how the racket head has not fallen behind his hand. I know it's hard to see from this angle, but in the WTA forehand, or the old school forehand, the racket head would already be back here and the butt cap would already be driving towards the ball. So we've got the delay. Non-hitting arm falls parallel to the baseline. Okay, let's slow this down even more. Got the racket and pat the dog, and now he's starting to drive forward. We've got the delay. The racket's coming in loose and behind. Strings to the floor. Very, very important. Notice how his racket face is not pointing towards this fence. It's pointing down towards the clay. Okay, that's how we generate top spin and racket head speed. On the ATP forehand, we uncoil. On this one, he's staying down with the legs because it's more of an on-the-rise ball, and often you will see pro players staying down on the forehand because they're usually hitting on the rise. It's only usually either back here on those high balls where they're jumping up before contact point, or when they're way into the court and they're jumping up on a high ball to hit a winner. So he's going to hit and freeze and stay down with the legs, and from here the wrist is back, L for leverage at contact point from the slot, and then he's going to cover the top of the ball until you can make a straight arm with the wrist and the racket head. Windshield wiper underneath the non-hitting shoulder. this is what you need to know to hit like Adrian Mannarino. I mean, he's making it pretty far into the Australian Open. If the things in this video are good enough for him, it's probably good enough for you as well. If you like what you learned here, I recommend taking the next step and going into my online course, because it takes the fundamentals of modern tennis into a system that anybody of any level can easily and quickly apply to their own game. Tennis Doctor is a self-help tennis book for adults. If your swing is f***ed up, you will never win. On the contrary, you could have slow reactions, terrible footwork, and be 40 pounds overweight, yet still produce a good shot if you can perfect your swing. By reading Tennis Doctor, you own the secret to a perfect swing, and if we have to, we'll call you an Uber to get to the ball in time. Read it now on Amazon and Audible in every country.